Okay, let's go ahead and define some stored procedures. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to port all of the SQL queries in the shared database to use stored procedures instead. And before I can do that, there's one thing that I have to do. So I have to grant the share user access to execute stored procedures on the shared database. So I'm going to go to the server link, and under user accounts, under the share user, I'm going to click edit privileges, then go to the database tab, and share user already has some privileges on the share database. It's got select, insert, update, delete. So I want to change those, edit privileges, and under structure, I'm going to click execute. So when I'm done with all of this, I'll be able to revoke all of these privileges for the share user, and everything will continue working because it will all go through stored procedures. But I'm not there yet, and for testing purposes, I want to keep these on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit go. And now the share user has access to run stored procedures. So let's go ahead and create a stored procedure. And I'm going to go to the shared database. And starting from the top, I'm going to look for a query. All right, so in LookupUser, I have a query that looks up the user information. And since this has a bunch of constants in it, I'm going to have to give those constants up because it's all going to be on the database side now, but that's okay because I have my column definitions in the database, so my stored procedures in the database. But to make my life easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint here and enable debugging. And then I'm going to go to the share homepage and I'm going to click sign up and I'm going to create a new account. And I forget what I'm up to, so I'm just going to go 60. And hopefully I'll hit that breakpoint. Good, I did. So at this point I have a query. I'm going to right click on that and say inspect. And then I'm going to copy the whole query. And then I'm going to turn off debugging and continue. I'm going to go back to phpMyAdmin, share database. Under more routines, I'm going to add a routine. So I'm going to call the routine LookupUser because that was the name of the PHP function. And it's going to take one value that I pass in. So let me paste in the query to start. So all of this stuff is going to be the same every time I call LookupUser except for this username here. That's what the PHP is going to pass into the stored procedure. So I want to create a parameter, a value that I pass in. I can either pass it in, get it back out, or combination both. And I'm going to call this name. And then I recall the type of username is varchar64. And if I didn't remember that, I could look it up in the users table, look at the structure, and you'll see the type of the username field. And then here where it says username, I'm going to put my parameter in instead, like so. So this is not deterministic. I'm going to leave definer and security type the default. Data access is going to be reading SQL data, and then comment lookup user data based on the username. Okay, so now I have a stored procedure that I can call. Let's actually look at how to call it. And I'm actually going to do two things here. So I'm going to use stored procedures, but then I'm also going to use prepared statements and parameter binding as well, because that's going to give me additional security as well. So let's just sort of start from the top. This query is going to just call the stored procedure and take a parameter. I don't need this safe username anymore. So here's what the SQL looks like to call a stored procedure. And then for the parameter I want to pass in, I'm going to use parameter binding, so I just put question mark there. And that gives me a query. Then I want to create a statement, which is connection pointer prepare query. And then I want to bind a value to this parameter. So statement bind param. And there's one parameter, it's a string. And then the value that I want to bind to that is username. So I've bound the parameter. Then I want to execute the statement. So that's actually going to do the fetch. I don't have any Boolean or binary data here that I'm passing in, so I don't need to send long buffers or anything like that. So now to do the same thing here, it's a little different when you're using prepared statements. So here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to say result is equal to statement pointer get result. And that returns the result set, and then this works the same. So that should be it. Let's go ahead and test this to see how it works. Put a breakpoint there, enable debugging, go back to the shared database, log out, and then sign up, mark x61, and hopefully we'll hit that breakpoint. Good. So we have a statement right here, and then we bind the params, we execute the statement, get the result set, so we have a result set, and then we return fetch array. So that gets stored in user. Let's look at the user data right now. This is null, which is good because the user doesn't exist. So we continue. So that seemed to have worked. Now let's try one where the user does exist. So I'm going to log out, sign up. I'm going to type mark x61 again and try registering. So we make the statement, we bind the param, we execute it, get the results, return the fetch of results. So that's stored in user. Now if we look at user, we see there's an associative array there with username, email, hash, role, verification code, and reset code. So that means it's finding the user correctly and returning the results in the same format as it used to before. And if we go back here, we see that we get the error username already exists. Please try a different username. So let's go back to our code. I'm going to turn off debugging and minimize that pane. And let's take a look at what we have in shared database right now. So all of this stuff is good, but we don't need any of this anymore. Let's go ahead and clean that out. So we're getting the connection. We're defining a really simple query here. We don't even really need a here doc for this anymore. Just going to go ahead and get rid of that. Preparing the statement, binding username to it, executing, getting the results, and returning the results. So test it one more time. Same result. Change that. Works.